Hey, Viking fans, I pulled some random guy off the street, and we're going to talk to him next in 3, 2, 1. Gather around, Skol brothers and sisters. This is Skol World, brought to you by Minnesota Sports Talk. Make sure you hit subscribe, leave a comment. You can follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Skol World. And now we got Judd, the sports dad, to replace Johnny NFL because he hasn't been cutting his weight. So welcome to the show, Judd. How's it going?
Thank you very much. It's going good, but I'm sure that Johnny has been doing a fine job. So
yes, he has. All kidding aside,
I
man.
Can keep up with Johnny.
All kidding aside, man. It's been great. It's been great. We've actually, you may have some advice to us. You and Mackie have been going on forever.
Yeah.
And me and Johnny in this show, I have a couple other shows, but me and Johnny on this show have only been together for 2 months. So any advice for us?
That's a good question. So 2 months. So you started after the season came to an end. Is that right?
How long has it been, Johnny? Maybe 3 months?
Might be a few more than that because we were. Well, I guess it's a month after the draft already, Dave. It's probably been 4.
Oh yeah, maybe we haven't had a regular show, but we showed off and on, trying to figure things out. Because I do another show called Under the Lights, and then with Purple and Skol for Days. Justin, he's actually probably met you. He's been to your watch parties a few times. He's on Twitter pretty regularly.
Absolutely.
Justin Day. And then I got the GG Sports guys. You may have ran across them on YouTube sometime, but we do a show called the Skol Experience on Wednesdays. And me and Johnny have been jumping around the calendar doing Skol World Live. So
you guys are veterans.
Oh yeah. I've been doing this for a year. I'm such a veteran. Now tell us about, you got a fledgling YouTube channel. Well, they got a few followers. Could you tell the listeners where they can follow you, man?
Absolutely. Score North, we have a YouTube channel where we have a show called Minnesota Sports with Mackie and Judd. And then our most popular show is purpledaily, which runs every single day of the year. Somehow we find a Vikings topic for 365 days per year. And check us out at scorenorth.com as well. So, yep, you can download our podcast. And I think purpledaily usually hits the streets. It usually hits the internet probably around 11 o'clock or so most weekdays.
Do you find it hard to come up with a new topic every day, or is it always something there ready to grab it?
You know, the great thing is it can be difficult at times, but the reality is this. The off season is essentially probably about a month. The month of July, June. So the Vikings have their 2-day mandatory mini camp, I think June 11th and 12th or 12th and 13th. Okay. From then until training camp starts in late July, it's going to be pretty dead. So we've got to come up with creative lists and stuff, which is not that hard. But now what's great is this league. I mean, if you look at it, starting with the combine, which essentially hits right after the season comes to an end, starting with the combine, you've got the combine, you've got free agency, which might be actually now, you guys, my favorite time of year. I love that thing. I mean, that first week is just such a great frenzy, and then it sort of keeps up. From there, it transitions into draft time. They now have moved the schedule release, which is a primetime show, into May, so that's great. And then you essentially go from that into OTAs minicamp. So at first you're like, wow, these guys are off for a long time. But the reality is the league has perfected the art of basically being in the public conscience 12 months per year. Mm-hmm. So it's really not that hard because, despite the fact, for instance, the schedule. Okay, when the season comes to an end, you know who the Vikings are going to play. But it becomes incredibly important when they play them. Do they play games in Green Bay in December and things like that? So it's I think about a week or so once the schedule comes out, there's stuff to talk about. So it's not nearly as daunting as it appears because the season itself might not have a lot of games, but the continual action of this league is absolutely genius.
Yeah. First question from one of our listeners, Too Evil to Hope, Johnny and JohnnyNFL knows who this is. He's like my nemesis. He plays the nemesis in my chat. But he asked, what is at this point is the most challenging part of your job when it comes to the Vikings? And he has a couple follow-up questions.
The most challenging part? Whew, that's a good question. I mean, I guess just from a standpoint of, and I don't know if this is challenging, but just from a standpoint of the fact that they have not made like a legitimate playoff run in what 4 years now, and the last run to the conference championship game was 2017. Like our supporters are outstanding, and our channel does really really well. I can only imagine what that would spike to if this team made the conference championship game, or dare I say it, the Super Bowl, and dare I say they win it. So
I've been telling my mom to hang on.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, our Before I Die thing is no BS. Like it's incredible. So I don't know if I'm answering the question correctly as far as a challenge
I think you
goes.
did, because his follow-up questions is, does the future look bright?
I like the direction they're going. Like, do I see this as being a Super Bowl team? No, but I like the direction, and I think O'Connell looks like he knows exactly what he wants. And I do love the fact that they now have a head coach in place for the first time in eons who can develop a quarterback. Because that's been my thing. You know, Mike was a defensive guy, and that had some certainly good moments. But, you know, Les was a defensive guy. Brad was supposed to be a quarterback guy, and Brad had a pretty good personnel background. Like, I think he did a pretty good job personnel-wise. But he wasn't really going to develop a quarterback, hence Brett Favre. So I think you have to go back to the last time that the Vikings had a coach that I think you could really trust to develop a quarterback was Dennis Green, who obviously did a good job with Culpepper, whose jersey you're wearing, Dave. So I think the future looks bright. I don't know if there's going to be a payoff immediately.
Yeah, one of the things one of my tweets that had the most responses to it was a picture of Kevin O'Connell and Bud Grant, and how similar they looked at, close to the same age. And they both, and people might not realize this, and the older you are, the more you're likely to know this, is that he was a player's coach. If there's a common saying, if you couldn't play for Bud Grant, you couldn't play for anybody. And now we seem to come like full circle, and unfortunately in the same year of his death, to Kevin O'Connell, who seems to have that same attribute. Do you see that? Do you see a little bit of Bud in Kevin O'Connell? They seem to get along pretty good.
Oh, they absolutely did. Well, Bud would qualify as being more stern, but you're exactly right. Like, I mean, the Vikings were traditionally, back in the days when training camps could go for months. I think in the 60s, training camps, because guys would get out of shape in the summer because they had ordinary jobs. Training camps, some coaches would, start bringing their players in right after the 4th of July. Bud's teams were always the last to report. Bud had no time for training camp. And so, yeah, as far as
he told players to go out and live your life too.
Yes,
football's not your number one thing.
Exactly. So Bud came off as more stern, certainly. And if O'Connell coached outdoors, there would be parkas involved and heaters involved.
Yeah.
But that being said, I think that there's similarities to the fact that they both care about the players a lot, and I also think that there's a flexibility as well. So, I mean, I definitely, for Kevin O'Connell to get, and yes, it was some fortune, but for Kevin O'Connell to get 13 wins from that team in 2022 is flat out impressive, because you're dealing with a defense that was not good, an offense that could be good but disappeared for large portions of games, and they still won 13 games. So yes, I would say that I do see similarities, although the eras were completely different in some of the things that Bud did and some of the things that Kevin does.
Yeah. Judd, you mentioned that you don't see this current roster as a Super Bowl team. I don't really either. I mean, anything can happen when it's single elimination, but in the trenches, for me, it doesn't feel like a team that's going to thrive in January, particularly on the defensive interior. I think continuity is going to help with the offensive line, but it's still those same guys that were giving up tons of interior pressure. And I just really worry when we get to a Philly, when we get to a Dallas, a San Fran. I feel like it's just going to be these long, drawn-out drives that just take the air out of the football, like we saw with the Giants last year. Is that kind of what makes you pretty hesitant to have any kind of lofty expectations like that?
That's part of it. I mean, I guess my starting point with my statement is this: they ran the entire thing back in 22. Like, they brought everybody back. Kendricks was back. Everybody was back. And they had some success. But this really feels like the first year of Kwesi and Kevin's team, right?
Yeah.
And so personnel-wise, I think it's just a transition. So this is not like a slam against them. There's going to be young players who screw up. They're going to be expected to. Defensively, I think the question becomes, and I'm really curious to see this, and I became more curious after going out to the first open OTA on Tuesday. Defensively, what type of difference can Brian Flores' coaching make? Because what I saw on Tuesday is a swarming, in a good way, chaos being caused. Three safeties moving around at times. I think if you gave him truth serum, O'Connell would tell you that one of the most disappointing things about his first year was, I think he got sold a bill of goods by Ed. I think Donatello came in with all the Fangio stuff, and Kevin, in Kevin's defense, he is an offensive guy, and he was going to call plays, and so Kevin wanted to sort of pawn off is too strong a word, but he wanted to delegate. So it's like, and Ed's like, I got the Fangio system down. Let's run the Fangio system. And Kevin had gone against that as an OC. And so he said, oh my God, yeah, that system is great. Because I remember at this time a year ago, you guys, we were talking about, man, how's Scene going to move around? What are they going to do with Harrison Smith? How is he going to move around?
And we didn't see it at all.
Right? And they basically played a 3-4, for lack of a better term for it, because I know it's not the exact same, but they basically played what looked to me like a 3-4 Tampa 2. Two guys, we got to have our guys. I mean, Harrison Smith statistically barely rushed the quarterback. He had 0 sacks. Now, he had 5 picks, but the reality is Harrison Smith needs to cause havoc, not just sit back there. So the defense I'm really curious about, because in my opinion, defense is so largely based on approach and attitude. Offense is execution, right? Like, if you don't execute offensively, you're sort of just screwed. Defense, yes, it's execution, but it's also aggressiveness. And I'll never forget 2005 with Tice going to Childress. 2005 to 2006 with Mike Tomlin, who came in, had been the secondary coach in Tampa. At the time was nobody. But he came in to run a Tampa 2. But what he also did, and in this case, Brad was going to call plays, so it was a very similar thing with, it wasn't going to be like Brad Childress was hands-on on defense. Tomlin brought an attitude, and it was impressive. And I remember, I didn't think it would happen that quick, but I recall thinking this guy is going to be a head coach, like soon. He's really good. Well, Flores has been there, and you can already see Flores has brought an attitude and approach. So I am promising nothing, but here's my opinion of a recipe for at least getting to the playoffs. If this offense can move into a top 5 scoring, and so, because I don't really care about yards. Yards are nice, but I mean, it comes down to scoring. If this offense can become a top 5 scoring offense, and if Flores can get the defense, let's say, to something between 12 and 15, I think this team can be successful. Now, to what you said, I think you're right. When you get to the playoffs, when things change. Now, if you have a home playoff game, I'd like to see them win that damn game. But as far as a playoff run going outside, I don't think that they're there yet. And I have said, too, as much as I think that he improved with O'Connell, I am hard-pressed to see Kirk Cousins ever hoisting a Lombardi trophy. I just think it's a long shot. But they certainly have components to be successful. I just don't think that they're there yet as far as, like, peaking.
Now, last year you were when you guys made your predictions on Purple Daily, you adjusted them after you saw some preseason moves and stuff. Now, I believe your first prediction was that we would go 9-8 based on off of the schedule release.
It was.
Your other two, Declan and Mackey, were a little more forgiving. After seeing them in OTAs, do you feel like you're going to be trending upward with after watching the defense? Impress you a little bit? I know it's OTAs, but do you feel a little bit better now that you've seen those guys running on the field with the Flores at the helm?
I like what they did a lot, and I like it. I like the fact that they're going to basically be the polar opposite of what Ed brought.
Oh, yeah.
So I love that. Part of my 9-8 prediction, though, I think, and look, this can change completely. Like, we have no idea from November 1st through the end of the season itself how those teams are going to be. I think this is a really tough schedule, and I think it falls tough. Now, it does help that I think the only potential real cold weather game is the Bengals in December.
Possibly Denver, maybe.
Yeah, possibly. Denver. But when you look at the start and the quarterbacks, I think it's going to be tough. I also think the division, though, to I guess add some hope here, might not be that good. I'm not going to be sold on Detroit until I see it. And the Detroit Lions having expectations is a different animal. Like, it's one thing to creep up and be like, oh man, they finished strong. But keep in mind, they didn't get off to a good start. They're opening on a Thursday night against the Chiefs. Are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. So, and Green Bay, I have no idea. Jordan Love could be a mess. I don't know. And I think the Bears are going to be good eventually, but not in 2023. So while I think that the Vikings do have a hard schedule, and I think that there are some questions, especially when you start with in week 2, you get Jalen Hurts. In week 3, Justin Herbert. Shortly thereafter, Patrick Mahomes. So yeah. I think there's some real questions there. But I also don't see a definitive, okay, that team is going to run away with the North. And just one last thing on Detroit. For as good a story as that was at the end of the season, keep in mind, Dan Campbell in the game here went for it, 6 or 7 times on 4th down. They made like 4 of them. It was super impressive. And then at the moment of truth, like at the moment of, okay, let's see it, he decided to try to kick a long field goal that submarined his team. So that's why I think Detroit with expectations is, we should at least slow down a bit. So I do think that the Vikings could have a tough season, but still be in decent shape unless like the Packers creep up, and I have no idea with them right now.
One of the good things about the 3 quarterbacks you just mentioned, I think San Diego and KC are both at home, right?
Yes, they are.
So yeah. So there's some. Yeah, the first 7 games is kind of our juggernaut part of the schedule. But we had kind of a juggernaut part of our schedule last year. We ended up doing pretty well in it. Like beating a Josh Allen, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Beating that, So there is some hope there that we did, even though it's a tougher schedule at the beginning, we at least were playing some of those tough teams at home. And so, I like the fact that we're playing playing Chicago and the Packers away early rather than later. So and then the later bye week and things like that. So some of the things were actually benefiting us, which is nice, I think.
I think the bye week's a little too late. I like a late bye. I think that bye is a little too late. I don't like that bye. I would prefer a bye around November 12th or so. It would
have been really nice last year with losing Darisaw, for a while.
You're right.
Yeah. Speaking of Darisaw, so I mean, you spoke on how the defense is going to be a lot different. Just being different should kind of in and of itself be an improvement from what we saw last year.
How could you be worse?
Right. But I saw a quote from Christian Darisaw that, he feels like the defense that they're going to see in training camp and preseason and practice throughout the week is going to improve the offense, just because there was a lot of things that they hadn't really seen in practice. And then once they got to games, defenses started mixing it up on them, which is really interesting to me. And obviously O'Connell comes from the McVay tree. He wasn't there in 2018 when they went and lost the Super Bowl. But Brian Flores was calling the defensive plays for New England when they held the Rams to 3 points in the big game. And now you go from a Donatel who comes from the Fangio scheme like Brandon Staley did when O'Connell was there in LA. And now he kind of flips that around. He's, I think with the defense improving, we might see the offense be even more prepared. I mean, it's obviously a high flying unit. There's a ton of talent, but when it stalled, it was when we saw, the Packers just jam the shit out of Justin Jefferson and blanket the safety over top. There's going to be those kind of looks, those kind of press man looks, the zero blitzes that they'll see in practice and be a lot more prepared for. You mentioned how you kind of want to see like a top 5 scoring offense. Anything you saw at OTAs that really speaks to that fundamental improvement on the offensive side too, just from like a preparation standpoint?
Not really, because there was JJ was not there.
Yeah.
Addison didn't take part. I don't know why. So like
Yeah.
I didn't see enough.
Got a follow-up question for that.
I didn't see a lot there. But what I will say is you're exactly right. And Johnny, part of the whole thing of why they brought in Donatel to run the Fangio system was because of exactly what you said. O'Connell wanted his offense to be tested in practice. He thought he was getting now Flores does not run the same scheme. It's called a base 3-4, but that's the only similarity. But that being said, this is what O'Connell wanted. He wanted his offense to be tested. He wanted Kirk to face looks that confused and or frustrated him in practice. So that was like part of the whole goal. And it obviously completely didn't work. So to answer your question, yes, absolutely. I think it's going to improve Cousins and more importantly, the entire offense that's starting in training camp, especially I think it's about a week in or so that they can hit, that they're going to be tested more. I think that's a huge thing. And I think O'Connell wanted that last year and didn't get it at all. Now, was that why the offense oddly, and I did find it strange, disappear for huge chunks of the game? I don't know. But I mean, this is the one thing I can say definitively is I'm excited to see the defense's new look. I will be very disappointed if the offense does not take a big step.
Yeah.
I'll be very disappointed, with the first round pick now supposedly opening up things. Jefferson can't get lost. Like it can't be like, well, they took him out of the game. That's too bad. And O'Connell knows that. That was the thing that was so frustrating with Zimmer's teams. Well, Jefferson's covered. He can't. Well, no, find ways not to. Like this is why you guys are paid so much. But the offense, I think it's very realistic for this to be a top 5 scoring offense if they get some consistency there. Because if you go back and look, there are large chunks of games and quarters where these guys would absolutely not score points. And I'm not talking Greg Joseph field goals. I'm talking points. I'm talking touchdowns.
Yeah.
So a little follow-up. You mentioned Jordan Addison. My listeners wanted to ask, well, I'm not going to have you answer this question, but I'm going to say it. Is Addison going to be a prima donna? I'm going to actually ask you this question. You answer this one. How can you better attract Addison's attention to get some words out of him?
I tried. He didn't practice on Tuesday, and he's walking off. And I'm like, Jordan, do you got a second? And he doesn't even look up. And so then I said, and now he has gone from being in front of me to being by me to being past me. And I'm like, is there a reason you didn't practice today? And he never looked up and didn't pay a bit of attention. He's a wide receiver. So like if he's a prima donna, I'm not going to be surprised and I'm not even upset about it. They are a different breed. They're cornerbacks and receivers. I think it's more important that he proves because I still don't know what was wrong, that he can stay healthy. I will say this, upon observing him, so the one favor he did in walking past me was I was standing right by him for a brief second. He is a really small human. Like he's the type of size where ordinarily you would say, well, he's a burner, right? Because if he's a burner, it's like, okay, yeah, but he's not. Now, when I watched him, and I was not close to him, but I watched him in the rookie camp last week. he looks like a football player. Like he can run routes, which is, as we've learned from Cordell Patterson, from Laquan Treadwell, you have to be able to run routes. Like that's the most important thing, because if you can run routes precisely, that gives you football speed. Because we've seen, going back to the 2006 draft, the 7th overall pick, or 2005 draft, the 7th pick, Troy Williamson, man, is he fast. Well, guess what? He couldn't catch the football. So I'm giving Jordan no grief here, but I am a little bit, I'm interested to see at his size if he can stay healthy. That would be my concern. Not that he's going to be a bust, not that he can't run routes, but he is, when he gets pressed at the line, I want to see if he can get off press coverage in this league. It's one thing to do it in college. It's another to do it against grown men who are playing cornerback in this league.
That's exactly what Dave and I talked about leading up to the draft, and why he and I were a little bit more interested in some of the bigger body receivers, just because that's what really vexed us was
and Quentin Johnson.
Was when JJ was getting that north-south double and our wide receiver 2 was getting pressed at the line. We weren't creating separation with our other options.
However, I was interested in Flowers. I was really interested in Flowers. I got a little anecdote.
Stock here, though, him.
You mentioned Troy Williamson. I had a little anecdote. I was working for Daktronics, who built the scoreboards for NFL Stadium as well. They did one of the first ones they built was the University of South Carolina, and I was working there doing site support. So I got to see Troy every day. Him every game, play in the SEC, and he was a burner. But his nickname was Stonehands. I mean, and when we drafted him
the Vikings,
when we drafted him 7th overall, I was going, and I'm being a Vikings fan and thinking, oh my god, well he does get he's burning by these guys getting wide ass open in college, but he couldn't catch it. He did drop half of the big bombs that he got. Made him look good, because he did get like 800 some yards. I'm like, but man, I was so disappointed that we drafted that guy that high. I was so mad.
I was in Denver for the last game of, was it the 2007 season? If you recall, Tavares Jackson, God rest his soul, threw 2 and 1 pass. One of the nicest passes he ever threw. It was a deep bomb. Troy had blown by the defender, was going to catch it about the 50, and was going to literally walk into the end zone. And I think the Star Tribune picture was the ball hitting his face mask. And he also dropped a crossing route. Short crossing route. But again, he had speed, to your point. Dave, he could have taken off. Dropped them both. And it's like, I think that was the last game, and that was it for Troy.
He was fast. He was super fast. And it was a good story. Survived a burn accident. I think he's a motivational speaker now.
He is. He's gone on to great things, yeah.
Yeah, he gone on to great things. So it's nice to see that he did end up doing something very good with his career in life. So that's good to hear. Now I had one let me give him some credit here. That what Richard, one of my listeners, says, what young athletes are really starting to show progress, do you think? And we kind of think a guy you're going to say, but go ahead.
On the Vikings, what young guys are starting to show progress?
Yeah.
On the roster right now? First of all, I've only seen the one practice, really, and 2 if you include the draft picks and then the guys that they bring in for look-sees, most of whom they don't sign.
Well, maybe I can tune it a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you think of Lewis Seen showing up and so fast back from his huge injury?
I think one of the most important things beyond the obvious ones, right? Like Jefferson has to have a big year. Well, no crap. I think one of the top 5 most important things is that Lewis Seen plays a lot, and that he shows progress. And I don't mean like, oh, nice progress. I mean substantial. Because the thing is, the fact he got hurt was terrible, and that was a gruesome thing to watch. But what was really interesting to me, and I don't know now in retrospect if this is an indictment on Donatel and O'Connell, on Seen, but I mean, he was your first-round pick. And he was not a candidate for the starting job on day 1 of training camp. Like, he didn't compete with Cam. He was with the second team all of camp. He lost that job in the spring. Right now, he lost that job in the OTAs and minicamp. That can't happen. You're a first round pick and you're a safety. I'm not saying it's simple, but it's a position that we have seen a lot of young men step into and excel, right? Kid in Baltimore, who they didn't take because they traded back. So I think that I think it's great he's back. He looked good. That's fantastic. But I think that is one of the underlying most important things. If Lewis Cine can't play in year 2 at his position, it makes him a first round bust, I think. Because again, if it's a different position that's more detailed, then I'd be like, okay, give it a third year. But if a first round safety can't step in very quickly, that's a real problem. So, but I'm not saying he can't. I hope he does.
I'm kind of putting it on Donatel a little bit because early on in the year, my biggest complaint is we were only playing like 13 guys. And 2 of those guys,
I know,
we barely put in there. And then finally around the Miami game, we gave Asamoah like 6 snaps. So I felt like, and I think there was a quote earlier in the offseason or preseason is Donatel saying that he is veteran, he was more in line to starting veterans. So I kind of felt like he didn't give these guys the opportunity, and he wasn't playing anybody but the starters, except for like a couple of guys on the D line.
Well, Kendricks and Hicks played
weird.
way too much.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
I firmly expect Jordan Hicks' playing time, snap count to be down substantially. Yeah, I think they're going to play 3 safeties quite a bit.
Yep, and I think Ward, right? They in the draft video they talked about him being a nickel corner rather than a safety.
Yeah, now I don't know. I don't know if he's going to step in and play that position immediately.
Yeah, he's got to earn it, but yeah.
But I think Bynum's going to find a way in, and it might not be starting opposite Harrison. I'm also curious to see because he looked like he was definitely doing a lot because Smith was not there on Tuesday. I'm also curious to see if Josh Metellus can compete for playing time. I like him. He looks the part. Like, he definitely looks the part. But they're going to use... I think what we're going to see is, if things work out, Asamoah is going to play a ton. I think they're going to play 3 safeties a lot. And I think that they're going to play a safety often as a hybrid linebacker. But I think they're going to move those guys around because the predictability last year was inexcusable. Like, in this league now, you can't be that predictable. So I think the one thing that we're definitely going to see is a lot of looks. And it's going to be called a base 3-4. But I think you're going to see three guys down at times, 4 guys down, 2 guys down at times. I think Flores is going to incorporate a lot of different concepts because your only real chance against the majority of quarterbacks now and coaches is to confuse them. I'll give you a perfect example. The Minnesota Vikings made Daniel Jones look way better than he really is.
He owes us $20 million a year.
Yeah,
that's how much he probably gained by the 2 games he played against us.
I don't disagree with you, but I mean they did nothing. They did nothing to confuse Dable or Jones. Nothing.
So wide open. Everybody was so wide open.
Yes, or when he took off, like they never gave him enough different looks to be like, okay, if I run, what's going to happen? If I don't, I mean, you nailed it right there. That contract, which by the way I think is ridiculous, but that contract is courtesy of Ed Donatel. In fact, he should be paid by the Giants.
Ed Donatel sign his checks, I think.
Correct. I agree with you.
He's got direct deposit going to 2 accounts, one to him and one to Ed Donatel.
and to be that like stagnant in your play calling and that stagnant with your scheme, God. The talent level needs to be a lot. I mean, we don't have the 06 Bears defense out here.
Right.
You know, we can't just call the same thing on 3 downs and expect to stop guys. Like there's not and as smart as offensive coordinators have gotten, as keen as so many of these good quarterbacks are in this league, you've really, I mean, and Aaron Rodgers has said too that one of the most difficult guys for him to play against is Harrison Smith. Mm-hmm. And the way what he does triggers what we did on defense under Zimmer. Mm-hmm. And that was all erased under Donatel. I think he blitzed like 11 times.
It was ridiculous.
Count all season.
He had no sacks.
No sacks.
He had no sacks. And yeah, I mean, even in Mike's last year, where fastball wise, they had really lost it, right? Even then, they were more creative. So I actually think
they
defense
manufactured sacks. We were one of the best sack teams,
Yep.
and there was only one guy that was over 8.
Mm-hmm.
I think the defense takes a step, and I also think that the other thing is, yes, it helps to have big names and recognizable names, right? But defense is also a mentality, and like if you play aggressive, it won't be long if they play this right before some guys who aren't household names start to jump out. Like if Brian Asamoah is what I think he can be, and I might be totally wrong here, but I love how he plays. And I mean, he got beat in the game here against the Giants in December. He got beat really badly.
Yep.
And then what? Came in, punched the ball, stripped it, recovered it. Okay, you know what? I would prefer that to Jordan Hicks or Kendricks just getting beat, and now you're screwed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of my favorite Asamoah plays for sure. Yep. It shows you right, that mentality. And I think Flores is going to love just sending him downhill. I mean, that guy's a bullet, so the extent to which he's going to blitz linebackers, and I think that'll help Jordan Hicks too, frankly. Jordan Hicks isn't going to be backpedaling every snap. I think he'll be able to play downhill a little bit, use his size.
You can't run fast running backwards.
Yep.
But guys, what's really weird too is, and to the point about Hicks, it really was like a 3-4 attempt at an updated Tampa 2. Linebacker bails backwards, right? Yep. Two deep shell. Like it was like, what are you even doing here? So yeah, I think the aggressiveness is going to help. It at least gives you a fighting chance probably against a guy like Herbert. Mahomes, I don't know, because he's just a different world. But the point is you're going to be showing them looks that at least might confuse them a bit, as opposed to, okay, by the second quarter, we know everything that you're going to do.
Yeah, seriously.
Go ahead. To take a sidestep here, I wore a Culpepper jersey for a reason. I own like 3 Culpepper jerseys. I own 0 Kirk Cousins except for maybe a football card. However, I support both of them. But there was a big hubbub on Twitter about, I think PFF guy picked Culpepper as one player to pick out of history to improve this team. And there was a big commotion about that. You guys had a good conversation about it. Now, my question is, do you think social media not being present in Culpepper's era kind of has a Vikings romanticized about what he was, and Kirk Cousins probably sees more criticism because of it? My question would is Kirk Cousins had 4th and 8, and oh my God, everybody went crazy. People jumped off of ledges. YouTube personalities are going crazy. I'm gonna get rid of him. I was on a show where my co-host says he wanted to just release him, and then compare that to 41 Donut, where you led a team and didn't even score a point. So what do you think of that contrast of today's social media and then back when Culpepper played?
It's way tougher. It's way, way tougher. In fact, if you trace Culpepper back, I mean, do you recall, I think he started his first game, he was drafted, 11th overall in 99, started his first game in 2000. Do you remember the fumbles, the hand size stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine
that? He had 22 interceptions one year.
I mean, but can you imagine that stuff on Twitter?
Yeah.
So yes, we absolutely do romanticize things, and Kirk and this team now, when things start to go wrong, people jump on Instagram or Twitter, blah blah blah, and start to torch the team. So yes, I think it's absolutely plays a role, plays a part. That being said, as I said, if I had to pick between peak Kirk and peak Dante, I'm taking Culpepper, because 2004 is one of the great years I saw. I also didn't bring this up on our show today, but gentlemen, one of the really sad things is this. The Vikings list post-Tarkington of really good quarterbacks is so small that there's not someone else just to say like, oh, shut up, that guy from, that guy from 91 to 96 is the, our Brett Favre or something. So it's sort of sad because we're having these conversations about quarterbacks who have put up solid stats, for instance, or something, but there's no real there's no Super Bowls there.
Yeah, you're
You
still
know,
splitting hairs.
yeah, we're splitting hairs, and then we're like, but do you remember the Cunningham season in '98, the Favre season in 2009, and those aren't really our guys even.
Yeah.
So our whole quarterback history post Tarkington, who retired after the '78 season, is so damn sad.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I mean, like Tommy Kramer's sub 500 record, Culpepper like
Yeah.
42% record, Kirk Cousins is almost 60,
Yeah.
like 57, 58. Played.
Yep.
Is there only two quarterbacks in our history that really played over 50 games, and that's Kirk Cousins and well, I guess Tommy Kramer, Dante Culpepper, and Fran Tarkington. Like those are the four guys, and only two of them got winning records. It's kind of, you know, and we thought Teddy Bridgewater would have had a chance to be that guy. And unfortunately, it didn't happen.
Give me a homegrown Kevin O'Connell developed franchise quarterback, and I'll get back to you with my answer.
Jaron Allen.
Jaron
Hall. Sorry. Oh. God, Jared Allen. Jaron Hall. Jaron Hall has like the personality and gravitas of what could be a starting quarterback. He's a little older. The same complaints they had about the quarterback from Tennessee, they don't seem to have about Jaron Hall, who's 25, right? So, but he's coming in as, hey, this guy's going to compete for a backup, but has the qualities of possibly being the successor. How do you feel about that pick in the 5th round?
I love the pick because, again, until he proves that he can't, I like the O'Connell developing a quarterback. I think that you need to take far more chances than Rick did. Because if you look at Rick's drafts, like he would take quarterbacks sometimes, but he had no clue what he was doing. O'Connell knows exactly what he's seeing. I can tell you, I think that the Vikings at least see, and this might not happen at all, okay? So just to be full disclosure, I'm just saying, I think in the
breaking news on ESPN tonight, Judd Zulgad predicts.
Yeah, I don't want this aggregated, okay? But I think when you look at the size and some of the abilities, I think that there is a Russell Wilson-esque comparison to Hall's build. Like they look the same. They've got strong bases, foundations.
They can really improvise.
They can both improvise and move. And I think the Vikings and 5th round pick, you know what? Go for it. Mm-hmm. If the kid's successful, awesome. If he's not, you at least took a chance. But this is why I feel like this is a very important new era of Vikings football. Because the quarterback position, which, you know, as I've talked about a lot, is the most important position in all of pro sports. The quarterback position is not one at which you're like, well, we whiffed on Kellen Mond, so now we're done for a while. Or we're going to take Nate Stanley. Well, that didn't work, so forget it, right? And Zimmer, by the end, couldn't stand quarterbacks. I do think he loved Teddy, but beyond that, I never thought that he really liked him. So I love the pick. Because I think it's worth a shot. And I also think it's going to be incredibly valuable experience that Kevin O'Connell, for both him and Hall, that this can be sort of a project. And I think it's good. And this is going to be the first time that O'Connell, as a head coach, gets this opportunity as well. So I think that this is a really good move.
This is my final question. I'll let Johnny end it. And I actually went over, I'm famous for it, but you give us a lot of good information, so I blame you for taking up all the time.
It's all my fault. I'll take full responsibility.
Mike Sports Vibes says, in the 2024 NFL Draft, what QB would you risk trading up for and why? And I'm asking you this because maybe that is a succession plan, and we find out that it is, and maybe we don't do this. But what do you foresee? And if we do it, who would you go after, or what would we do in that situation?
Well, there's the USC kid, Williams, and the North Carolina kid. And beyond that, I've seen a ton of names, but I have no clue. And these things often change. I think with how aggressive the Vikings attempted to be, now they didn't do it, in trying to get a top 3 pick, I think that there's a chance that they're going to be aggressive again. I guess
almost like a dress rehearsal for next year.
Almost. The issue is this. You're going to have teams that are going to do what the Bears did and tank for Caleb. So, and if they do, they're not going to make a trade with you. You're not going to be able to compensate them enough. Do I think that the Vikings will draft a quarterback? Yes, but here's the important thing to keep in mind. There is nothing that's completely closing the door on Kirk coming back. There is nothing like this is not a goodbye. This is hold on a second. You know, you want for what the third or fourth time since you arrived in 2018 another extension. We're not prepared yet. We're examining our options, which by the way, I love this. First of all, Kirk's going to take it fine. Kirk's Kirk. He's sort of a weird dude, but he's going to take this fine. Second of all, there is nothing wrong with motivating a player by saying, prove it again. But I don't think that the door is closed on Kirk. I do love the fact that I do think that these guys are going to be far more proactive in examining the options here. I would say that if they're going to draft a quarterback right now, I would not be surprised to see them trade up. I don't think that it's going to be possible, though, to get to the first pick. I'm guessing a team that needs a quarterback is going to do what the Bears did. Now, they did trade because they didn't, but make sure that they are the worst team in the league.
Yeah, I think kind of our one thing we can, or our hope we can kind of cling on to in that department is the Cardinals being terrible.
Oh, God.
Getting a top 2 pick and still being committed to Kyler coming back off that injury the following year. So maybe that's just a big bidding war.
Do you think that they would still be committed to Kyler or try and
I
move
don't think
that
so.
outrageous contract? Because you've got 5 years of control then again. See, that's the thing is, if my choice is stay committed to Kyler at that point in time and or use the first overall pick on Caleb, I'm going Caleb because now I control him for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. And that franchise did the same thing to Josh Rosen with Kyler.
Yes,
right
they did.
Yeah.
Yes, they did. But they are a mess. And
yeah.
I don't know that Gannon, who was an assistant here with Mike and was the DC for Philadelphia, Jonathan Gannon, I'm not quite sure if he has a plan. I'm not quite sure what the plan is there. The Cardinals are back to being a mess.
They should start paying their players lunch for free. They should start giving them free lunch.
They charge them for
their players keep coming here.
Gatorade,
Thank you, Murphy,
right?
for coming here.
Gatorade, right? They're like charging them for like drinks and stuff.
That's silly. That's silly. It's like in Moneyball. I don't want my guys paying for pop so stock my machine for 2 years or something like that as part of the trade. So maybe they should be doing that.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to ask you anyway, Judd. This was another comment from the community that I saw, and especially since you guys are the Super Bowl before we die guys, we have a question that goes, why is the franchise always good, not great? Owners only care about filling seats and not a Super Bowl. Do you feel like we've kind of turned over a new leaf on that from the top down? Like, do you feel like this new regime is sort of re-energizing that, where it's not going to be, the roster's good enough to maybe win the division, let's get a veteran quarterback in here on his last legs and try to make a push for a playoffs? Do you think it's really kind of a new mindset internally?
Whew, that's a very interesting question. So when I covered the Vikings for the Star Tribune in 2000,
that was from Lewis Carroll. All right.
Yeah, the window wouldn't open back up for me. I was going to credit it. Lewis Carroll.
I want to give the listeners some credit, so go ahead.
So in 2000, when was it? 2005 or 6. I sat down with the Wilfs at that time, and they grew up big Giants fans. Okay. Yeah. So their basic philosophy on football is we always want our team to be competitive to make the playoffs because, once you get in the playoffs, it's a single elimination tournament and anything can happen. So the Wilfs, and I think they've only won 3 games, been that bad once. What was that, 2011 or 12? But I don't know that it's driven by this. We think we're going to lose season ticket holders or people are going to bail. Now, if you were bad for 5 years, they'd bail. But the Vikings aren't going to be bad for 5 years. But I think that their premise is they want to get their team in the playoffs every year. And that is why, and this predates the Wilfs, but that is why this franchise has been for so long. Because if you go back and look, there's not a lot of like terrible runs, terrible years. That's why this franchise has so often been competitive and good, but never great. And it's partially why they have not been to a Super Bowl since what, the 1976 season, January of 77, when they lost to Oakland. So, long story short, I don't know that this is like driven by greed. I think it's driven by a feeling that if we just get into the tournament, there will be a chance. Do I feel like they're turning a different corner? Perhaps a little bit. I think that we need to see more. There's still a lot about Kwesi, especially as GM, we don't know yet, as far as what he'll do and what his philosophy is going to be. But I at least like the direction that this franchise seems to be on. I would say it's very fair to say this. There's a lot of questions, though, and I'm not even saying this in a negative light. There's a lot of questions to be answered, and there is certainly something to be said for what the Bears did. The Bears put themselves in a really good position to, as bad as they were in 2022, to clear out a ton of cap space and to have some really nice draft picks, which is why I have always said tanking is not the worst thing. Being bad for 6 years is the worst thing. But if you tank, ordinarily, especially in football, it's not impossible to rebound and come back up fairly quickly.
Your thought on this really quick before we call it. We brought up the fact that always getting the playoffs, you have a shot. Well, isn't this almost one of those years? Because the NFC, you're looking at the Eagles, and then you're looking at a group. And you don't have to go beat the AFC teams in the playoffs. You just got to beat the NFC teams. And considering the, universally, I think Mackey even said this on one of your shows recently, Cousins is being ranked universally 2 or 3 as the best quarterback in the NFC. And then we're right there behind the Eagles, bunched in with the Cowboys, I guess the Giants, the Lions, San Francisco without a quarterback, really. When you got multiple quarterbacks, you got none, right? So that's kind of the old saying. Do you feel like that there is, even though I don't think you think we're a Super Bowl team, but the path is easier this year, that it could potentially be that situation with us facing the Eagles?
I get your point totally. I guess the problem is this. That was what you just went through was darn near the exact scenario in 2022. Like, how do you not beat the Giants here? And then once you get to the second round, okay, it's tougher. But that's my thing is,
well, Flores. Flores came in. We're looking to see we're having a new defense.
Yeah, well, also don't check down on 4th and 8.
Yeah.
And so there's, but the point was, you won 13 games. You won your division for the first time since 2017. You get to a home playoff game, and you get beat by a team that was okay, but certainly not great, right? So, yes, theoretically, I understand your point perfectly, and I don't disagree. I think the division might be bad, and I think that the conference has Philadelphia and then some question marks. And then it's got some flat out probably bad teams. And it's probably got 1 or 2 teams that are going to surprise us that we just don't see yet, because that's how this league operates. And yeah, Flores helps, and improved offense helps. When you get to the playoffs, it gets more difficult there. And that's why I think that no matter how successful you are in the regular season, especially if you have to travel, now Brian Flores is going to have to take this thing from I improved it a lot to now we're going to play our best game. Look, guys, the last time the Vikings won a playoff game, I would argue this. Mike Zimmer had arguably his best game as the coach of this team. That Saints playoff win in 2019 was really impressive. That's the game where they took Hunter and Griffin, moved them inside. Drew Brees was like, what the hell is this? That defensive game plan was brilliant. That's the type of game plan that you're going to need. Unfortunately, you go then and play San Fran, and they literally kick your ass on both front lines. So
it's hard to play in San Fran for sure.
Well, San Francisco is intent on kicking your butt, literally kicking your butt.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hey, Judd, it was a pleasure having you here, man. I know I reached out to you probably in December. You got a lot of people, reaching out to you. And one of the great things is I've seen you around the YouTube, giving other YouTubers your time. We appreciate that so much. Thanks for coming on, man.
You're welcome. Fun stuff, and hopefully there is plenty of excitement come fall, because it's a lot more fun for all of us when the Vikings are good.
You heard it here, folks. Judd predicts a Super Bowl right there. I'll dub it over. I'll do some AI.
We're going
on
to
him.
Vegas for the Super Bowl, right?
I'll put some AI on this.
Two trips to Vegas.
And you heard it here, folks. All right, appreciate it, Judd.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Skol Vikes.
Thank you.